having looked, he asked, "It's clear that my brother wasn't there, right?" The subordinate replied, "Yes." Right after watching the speech on TV, he rushed to the chairman's house and into the reading room. There was a loud noise, but I don't know exactly what they talked about. The director laughed and said, "Without looking, I know." Given his personality, he must have been whining to Dad. He doesn't know anything beyond that. At this point, the subordinate asked the director, "Is it certain that Si-hoon proposed a merger of positions?" But why did the chairman easily agree to it, and even accept it in just one day? The director replied, "Perhaps it's a script my father had prepared from the beginning. Since taking over Handestel, Si-hoon has already started showing his intentions." The subordinate speculated, "Fantasy might indeed be our chairman's disguise." The director, smiling, mentioned Jin Der-jun. "Even though I am over 30 years old, he is a threat. Fortunately, he is the youngest. And luckily, the eldest, Young Chun, is just a fool." At this moment, the cousin and Do-jun were still in conversation. In the luxurious room, he looked at Do-jun as if wanting to speak, then stopped. Do-jun also silently waited to see what he would say. Then he spoke up, "Could it be possible, or not?" Hearing this, the cousin shouted in his face. Do-jun, annoyed, asked, "Are you raising your voice at me? Don't you understand why?" Suddenly, the cousin became as gentle as a rabbit. He said, "Sorry." Then he buttered up Do-jun. "Think about it. As the eldest son of this house, how can I just sit around and be kicked out like this?" Do-jun replied, "In royal succession, peace comes when it's inherited by the eldest and their sons. If a second or third son inherits, there's always bloody purging. In order, it's your turn after catching the fish. That's why I want to take the chairman's position at Sunyen Group." Do-jun smiled and said, "That way, my family won't suffer any losses." Suddenly, the cousin happily and triumphantly responded, "Of course." Then he pretended to be wise. Indeed, our Do-jun knows something. But he doesn't realize that this guy is just pretending to be dangerous. He doesn't really know anything. Do-jun pretended to sigh heavily, as if troubled. He then asked further, "In the merger with Sunyen Motor, the stocks of the subsidiary owned by Sunyen Motor will be transferred to another subsidiary, right? That subsidiary will become important in the group, correct?" The cousin, also pretending to be wise, replied, "Right." Do-jun asked, "What would happen if someone other than the eldest uncle took over that company?" Do-jun didn't answer immediately. He thought that if he thought more carefully, he could understand the truth, but it wasn't a big secret. He continued, "That's the entire title of the contract I saw. It was a plan for restructuring the management of the corporation." The cousin was shocked, as if struck by lightning. Restructuring the management? Why? Do-jun then told his brother, "I've tried to help you as much as I can. Now, it's up to the eldest uncle and you to protect it." The cousin replied superficially, "Aha," but he was confused inside, as he was just a rich kid without much knowledge. Do-jun looked at him with a sense of triumph. He remembered the cruel family and thought about Sundank Motors. The hidden claws of each of them would gradually be revealed. "Let's see whose claws are the sharpest at this moment," he thought, referring to the busy author. Not knowing what else to draw, he just kept drawing the corporation of Si-hoon, who was looking at his own pictures and news in the newspaper. Then, the old man said, "It has finally come to this. We are the acquirer, but I'm worried that we'll be pulled into Sunyen." Do-jun, who always drank a box of banana milk whenever he came here, asked, "When will we make the payment for the acquisition?" Si-hoon put down the newspaper, hearing the young man talking to himself. "After the merger, 1.2 trillion won should be transferred, so we have to transfer $1 billion. So, the earliest would be next year, right?" Si-hoon said. "You should ask your uncle about that. If the merger procedures are completed, the shortest time would be by the end of the year. In total, it's $3.2 billion. Now, the exchange rate is 1.1001, but it's more than 3.5001 now. Dujun, while drinking his banana milk, asked, how much is the tied-up amount? His uncle replied, $600 million, as you said. This year, I'm just managing money without new investments. $600 million will also be recovered next year. Dujun finished his milk, chewed on the straw, and thought about it. The contingency plan is also good. I've exhausted my memory and returned with an investment 100 times over. What would happen if a Wall Street fund manager were reincarnated instead of an ordinary person like me? Wouldn't someone like that end up being the richest person in the world? Why is Sehun speaking up now? First, I'll transfer $1 billion so I can pay at any time. Dujun intervened, no, just leave it. Anyway, it won't be paid until the end of the year. His uncle, hearing him say that, didn't understand what the young man was planning. He was startled and replied, did you realize that the increase in the exchange rate is a bit strange, isn't it? Dujun answered, isn't everyone eagerly ignoring it? Didn't you see the dollar rising like the tide, jumping 251 in a month? Sehun felt a chill and asked, isn't it supposed to be more stable towards the end of the year? Dujun thought it was not just the observant ones but also the ones asking absurd questions. Everyone seemed to think so, trying to hide the approaching storm due to the bankruptcy of major corporations and the strong winds of the presidential election. Dujun explained to his uncle, there's a difference between an increasing exchange rate and the depreciation of the dollar. If the dollar falls while you hold 10 billion won, doesn't that money become useless? Compared to 10 billion won on a deserted island, isn't a loaf of bread still more valuable? Sehun, terrified, asked, are you saying that even with money, you can't buy bread? Are you talking about the dollar? Dujun looked at his foolish foster uncle and replied, yes. I know the IMF crisis will explode soon. By then, you won't be able to find a single dollar. Sehun asked again, what if the exchange rate keeps rising? Do you plan to buy back in dollars? Dujun calmly answered, I'm planning to negotiate. Surprised, Sehun asked, negotiate what? Dujun replied, to buy back a kin corporation with the condition of paying in dollars. I intend to wrap it up quickly. Sehun was dumbfounded, not understanding what he was talking about. Then he realized and laughed, right, what do you do with a gold bar? I was shallow-minded, trading a gold bar for a life jacket. The dollar is like human blood, without it flowing, people die. Whoever holds the blood bag for transfusion can easily take the gold bar from the collapsing person. Sehun smiled and said, when the country's foreign reserves hit rock bottom, will you become the savior, Dujun? Dujun just smiled. It's not me but the uncle of Fantasy Company. Hearing this, Sehun smirked in a chilling way. He asked, is it because you're young that you don't want to show up, or do you have something to hide? Dujun countered, if you had 1 trillion in this world, what would you do? Give out gifts and bribes? Would the world's heirs agree to that? Sehun asked, so, will people be wary of you? Dujun smiled, that's part of it. Hearing this, his uncle still smiled benevolently. He continued, all right, now I'll be your horse. Just pull the reins and swing, do as you like. But time is running short, I'm already 50. If it's long, then 5 years from now. Even if you manage directly, you'll have to find someone. What's in it for me? Dujun was astonished, unable to believe his uncle dared to say that. At that moment, Sehun pointed at Dujun and said, I've been by your side for 5 years, treating you like my own grandson. I want to retire now and wait to live on a deserted island. He leaned back in his chair with a satisfied smile. Meanwhile, Dujun just stood still, looking at his uncle. Aside from money, he didn't know what to say, just lucky. The author then depicted the evening at the Sun Yen Corporation building. The uncle was listening to his son reporting something. He asked, what is it? Seeing his uncle's rage, he slammed his hand on the table, probably hurting a lot. He thought, clearly, my father came to pat my back and promised me a position in the office, but he changed the board of directors behind my back. Whispering sweet words while secretly hiding his son. Ending the day, the uncle said, so? If the motorcycle has to split, then we need a little change. The entire framework might shake, but there's no need to worry too much. His son asked, but, Dad, if the shares of the motorcycle are transferred? The uncle, angrily, I said it's fine. I'll know how to handle the production, not just focus on normalizing it. Don't miss this opportunity and show me your capability. His son, not daring to say anything, just said, I understand, Dad, and quickly ran out the door, bowing. Now alone in the room, the uncle fell into deep thought. He turned and vented his anger on the landline phone. What era is this to still use such an outdated phone? Angrily, he shouted into the phone, Planning department, all gather, meet me right now. After finishing his sentence, he violently threw his phone down, as if he wanted to smash it. He thought to himself, Dad, before you make such bizarre decisions, I need to sprint to the finish line. Then Secretary Chun went to a room where his older brother welcomed him eagerly, asking, I hope I'm not disturbing you while you're busy? He replied, no matter how busy, one must make time to have a meal with the chairman. Ah, brother, just sit down and relax. I'm still confused. If Soo-young collaborates with Achin, who benefits more? Of course, Dad did this very well, the secretary said, smiling, agreeing with him. He was also quite perplexed by how quickly things were happening. Seeing the secretary like this, his brother felt annoyed. Was this all just an act? Then the younger brother asked, if they split, Director Chu will no longer have any ties with Soo-young. That makes me really sad. The secretary, finding the young man too naive, asked bluntly, are you really confused, or are you testing me? If it's the latter, then it's truly absurd. The chairman's son was taken aback. Indeed, his suspicions were not wrong. But it wasn't about handing over to Achimoto, it was about swallowing Achimoto whole. The director quickly smiled and said, what are you saying this morning? Are you probing me? It's just a precaution. Hearing this, the secretary glanced at him and said, I have been with the chairman for over 35 years. In all that time, I only opposed him once. Do you know what it was? Of course, he didn't know. What an inappropriate question, the man thought to himself. He said, it was when we started the oil business in the Middle East. War broke out, and the supply of crude oil was always in a state of emergency. The chairman and I flew to Tetsak to sign a contract for crude oil. Tetsak was done hastily. After driving on an endless highway, we stepped into a steakhouse. That day was so hot that it exhausted me, and I didn't want to eat anything. The chairman ordered a steak and shared it with me. The smallest portion there was 600 grams. He craved it so much that he remembered it. At this point, the director also reminisced about Southern American steaks, weighing in at 300 grams, but the secretary replied, I objected. I wanted one plate each. The director then asked, so you didn't want to share anymore? The secretary cunningly replied, exactly. The director thought to himself, I thought he was telling an important story. Is he joking with me now? Then suddenly, the director understood, not liking to share the meat means not agreeing with the split. He then said, Director Chu may not like sharing, but I can't bear to leave it because it's too much to eat all at once. Hearing this, the secretary replied, both the chairman and I finished it all. It seemed like a lot, but I ate it all. You won't know if you don't try. 600 grams isn't that much. The director was taken aback, his face paled, and he began to ponder. The old-style business contributors, although they were just salaried employees, still cherished the Soo-young Corporation as if it were a family heirloom. When the owner of the chariot changes, both the driver and the people change, but they constantly worry about whether the chariot will break down. They are by nature horse beaters, but to get a chariot, one needs a charioteer. Afterwards, the director pretended to be casual and asked, "Director Chu, you seem to be eating quite well, aren't you?" The secretary started, "Now, I can't eat like that. I'm getting old. But I still feel healthy, so I think I'm not that old yet." The cunning director said, "If you finish, you'll get a 600-gram steak as a gift." At this point, Secretary Chu was slightly annoyed because this guy kept calling him director this and that. He spoke up affectionately and called out, "Donkey." The director, feigning respect, replied, "Yes, Secretary." Secretary Chu sternly responded, "Yes, Secretary." Vice President Di Chun is his biological older brother and also the eldest son. "You don't have a share in this." The director is angry. "You know very well that Chani doesn't have any special talent." Secretary Chu calmly replied, "You have the ability to stay by his side and help," but the director was still very annoyed. "Why not let him stay by your side to support you?" Secretary Chu calmly answered, "How can someone without ability help someone with ability? It's useless." The director called out again, "Brother?" But Secretary Chu firmly stated, "I can't envision a scenario where an older brother helps a younger brother. It's impossible. He will surely be eliminated soon." The director, trying to flatter, said quickly, "I will arrange for Chani to be in the subsidiary company, and we will manage each one separately." However, Secretary Chu just listened and was not swayed. He said, "Even though I'm just a farmer for the Sunyang Corporation, I am proud to have contributed to the development of this land. I don't want to see it torn apart." But the director was still gritting his teeth, determined not to be hindered. Having revealed his true nature, he had to see it through. Thinking this, the director, whenever he thought about it, was confident that he could make this land more fertile, confidently reclaim the land, try, and turn it into a larger plain. "Isn't this the vision you see?" Secretary Chu just quietly listened and then replied, "The chairman is not the one who decides and nurtures the successor." The secretary spoke directly to the director, the chairman's son, "Don't even dream about it." The director was surprised, "I haven't been sleeping, so how could I be dreaming? What do you mean by no decision rights?" The secretary continued, "Maybe that day he will consider and continuously evaluate until the day before his death. Perhaps he will announce the successor of the Sunyang Corporation at the end of his will." The director, angry, asked, "Does it mean that if we don't prepare for succession in advance, we will have to pay taxes? You didn't see that coming." Secretary Chu calmly said, "Compared to taxes, the future of the corporation is a much bigger concern." The chairman's son, the director, grew angrier day by day. He got mad, stood up, and yelled, "So what is Director Chu's intention until now? Didn't it sound like Chani would inherit everything?" At this point, Secretary Chu, also tired, stood up and replied, "That's just my opinion." "Aren't you asking for my opinion?" This time, the director was taken aback, realizing he had misspoken. He thought to himself, "Is this a warning? A warning not to underestimate the power of the one holding the reins of the chariot, not to dream of changing its owner." He knew that the opinions of people like Chun played a crucial role in the father's final decision. Thinking so, he still sneered and said, "The battle hasn't even started yet, but I'll remember this." Hearing this, the secretary just smiled and walked away without saying anything more. At this point, the author paints the scene of a morning at someone's house. It was not yet known who the man wearing glasses sitting at the desk was, looking up. He asked, "What brings you here?" The second son of the chairman replied, "What's so surprising about this guy not being able to come?" At that moment, the father, wearing glasses, hurriedly came to shake hands with the second son. "Have you ever visited here before, 15 years ago?" The second son of the chairman was also surprised, wondering how it had already been 15 years. The man with glasses still smiled and replied, "It's amazing how time has flown." The second son fell silent for a minute. As he reminisced about his youth, the man with glasses asked, "But I heard you made a lot of money. What's with this appearance?" The second son dismissed the rumor, saying, "Even if I did make money, I couldn't do it like you." Suddenly, the man felt uncomfortable and said, "I look so uneasy. Tomorrow, I will send someone to expand the director's office. Dress more appropriately." The man with glasses refused, saying, "I can't, I still have debts to pay." The second son was extremely surprised. "You too? Could it be you?" But the man with glasses waved it off, "Don't be so surprised. I didn't intentionally use the company's bonds. I started this business with the money from selling the farm. Don't you know? Speaking of which, it turns out this grandfather with glasses is the father of that kid, right? Why does he look so worn out now, I wonder?" The older brother replied, "Ah, I remember now. The man with glasses, Nam's father, pretends not to care about money. He says it needs to be repaid." The older brother too laughed and replied, "Only now do I realize that it's not just about making money, immediate repayment, including interest, is necessary." Hearing this, Nam's father chuckled, "Let's not talk about that anymore. Forget it. What brings you here?" The father of the second son, in a moment of confusion, couldn't answer. Then he suddenly asked Nam's father, "Junkie, will you continue on this path?" Junkie, not understanding, asked, "What do you mean?" The older brother too, annoyed, replied, "I'm asking if the movie at the cinema has ended yet." At this, Nam's father, also looking gloomy, asked, "Is there nothing to look forward to in the company?" The older brother too, pretending to be confused, continued, "Yes, you and I, the son of yours." Suddenly mentioning the son startled the father, leaving him at a loss for words. The older brother became serious again and continued, "I don't want to lose this youngest sibling." Then, the two grandfathers suddenly looked at each other with deep affection. The younger one, puzzled, asked the elder, "What are you talking about? There's also the third brother." The second grandfather replied, "He's no longer my brother. That guy is just an older brother in appearance." Hearing this, the father also fell into deep thought. The older brother anxiously asked, "What does that mean? Do you also have your own ambitions?" The younger brother replied, reflecting, "It's not exactly ambition, but I think I'll try once, truly being a father." The older brother quickly asked, "What do you think about Dujun?" The younger brother replied, "That kid, he aims to become an entrepreneur like our grandfather." This startled the older brother. The younger one quickly waved his hands, saying, "Oh, don't misunderstand. He has no intention of starting from an affiliate of the conglomerate. He wants to build it with his own hands." Hearing this, the older brother felt that these two were really daydreaming. The younger brother had spoken, and he also resolved to support Dujun to the best of his ability. The older brother asked, "What does that have to do with the company?" The younger brother, folding his arms, answered, "Even though I am the youngest son, I also share blood with Chairman Suyen of the conglomerate. I won't refuse what you offer, but if you don't offer anything, I will just take my share." The older brother, feeling a headache, replied, "You'll take your share?" He suddenly realized something and fell silent. The father of the protagonist continued to ask, "Suddenly you act like this. I guess something happened on your side?" The older brother, frustrated and stunned, hastily replied, "It's not that." He then stood up and said, "You just need to stand by my side. If I win, I will prepare the capital to fulfill Dujun's dream." But the younger brother stubbornly asked, "And what if the eldest brother wins?" At that moment, the older brother answered, "Then you will have to fight with the eldest to become a true C." Hearing this, the father of the protagonist remained silent and said no more. At this point, the older brother stood up, stared intently at the photo of the male and female leads of the movie Titanic on the wall, and asked in confusion, "What is this movie? What is Titanic?" The younger brother still replied, "Ah, that movie. Our company will release it next year. We are currently looking for a theme to showcase." The kind-hearted older brother said, "Let me know if there's anything. If the tickets don't sell, I will buy them all." Hearing this, the younger brother was overjoyed and quickly responded, "Thank you for the offer." As the night grew late at the protagonist's house, the father looked at the couple in front of him and asked, "Did you two come to see me at this hour just to borrow money?" Looking at them, he continued with a headache, "What is going on, really? You visit in the morning, and then something happens at home in the evening that I missed, right? Did the shopping mall director come to borrow money from the short-term company director? Is a day at the shopping center only worth the profit of a single movie?" he asked. Hearing this, the sister felt a bit embarrassed. She said, "When father took over Hondu, he took all the cash, and now all the money at the department store has been frozen. I have been reporting the expenses and withdrawing money from my father." The younger brother, hearing this, was shocked. "Did my sister cause some trouble again?" The sister, looking at her husband, angrily replied, "It's all his fault. Father has locked our accounts because this man wants to become the mayor of Seoul. Even the money from the shopping center, I can't touch." The younger brother was utterly shocked. "Mayor of Seoul? Really?" The sister continued, "I heard that you received something big this year, right? Don't you have some money too?" But the younger brother replied, "How much can a successful Korean movie make? Do you know how much it costs? 60,000 soldiers and 6,000 cavalry, 670,000 viewers, so it's only 4 billion won gone. That's without considering the distribution company's fees and production costs." The younger sibling shouted at the couple, saying, "When discussing matters, please try to say something that makes sense." The brother-in-law, upon hearing the sum of money, scoffed and stood up, saying, "Pretend as if you haven't heard anything." After he spoke, the couple also stood up and left, probably realizing that the father was very poor. The younger sibling had a headache, as despite being lovely all morning, they were constantly bothered about money. At that moment, when the sisters' couple was sadly walking out to the yard, the main character, who had just returned home, saw this and exclaimed, "Oh, uncle!" Politely, "What are you two doing here at this hour?" Seeing her handsome and wealthy nephew, the aunt emotionally exclaimed, "Do-jun, let's overlook this scene as the author didn't write it." Fast forward to the scene where the main character enters the house. Looking through the living room, he saw his father sitting. Do-jun called out, "Dad." The father replied, "Do-jun, come here and talk to your dad for a bit." Do-jun responded, "Sorry for coming home late today. I'll come back earlier tomorrow." But the father answered, "I don't have the strength to enforce a curfew on a grown man." He continued, "This afternoon, Uncle Song-ki came, and in the evening, your aunt stopped by." Do-jun replied, "I just met Auntie outside the house." The father gently took a sip of his coffee and said nothing more. Do-jun felt uneasy, wondering what was going on. At that moment, the father finished his coffee in one gulp and said, "It's clear you're my son, but why don't you resemble me at all?" Hearing this, the main character was startled, wishing he could split into his past and present selves. He felt proud of his artistic ability and thought, "I'm bored with managing money, but my son has a talent for investing. How can we be so different?" The main character panicked, thinking, "Why is Dad saying this all of a sudden? Did he notice that I'm not the real Do-jun?" Seeing his son's stunned expression, the father asked, "Why do you look so surprised?" Do-jun pretended to be calm and replied, "I don't know what to say." The father looked at his handsome and wealthy son and smiled happily, saying, "Actually, I had already heard about it from Seoul." The main character was startled, not knowing what his father had heard. The father continued, My son has assets worth over 3 trillion won and bought the Akin conglomerate, owning the real investment company controlling Hollywood. Do-jun remembered the annoying old man Si-hoon and wondered what he had said. Do-jun thought they were close when they were young and relied on each other in a foreign land. It would be strange for the father not to reveal the secret of his dear friend's son. The father looked at the main character and laughed, saying, "My expression is just like yours when I first heard about you from Seoul." Do-jun quickly bowed and apologized for not telling his father. But the father said, "It's okay, I might not have believed it before." Would I believe that a high school student managed 20 billion won and spoke fluent English? Do-jun was scared that the father might realize he wasn't his real son. However, the father smiled and sincerely said, "You're amazing." Do-jun's eyes teared up. It was the first time his father praised him. The father continued, "I was shocked when I heard, but I felt proud and didn't say anything. I'm proud of how much money you've made and of your talents." The main character was deeply moved, being praised like this for the first time. The father affectionately asked, "Do-jun, do you want to take over the Sooyoung conglomerate?" The main character smiled and replied, "It's just a tool to help me in the future, not my main goal." The father asked further, "Then what is my son's dream?" Do-jun straightened his back and replied, "Our group surpasses even Sooyoung." He continued, "If one wants to establish a company like that, they must have a company. Mother and I set it up from the beginning, and I will buy the subsidiary of the Soonyen group. Of course, I also need branches of other major groups, not just in Soonyen." The father, looking annoyed, asked, "Is Soonyen a small business that you can buy? Is it a supermarket near our house that you can purchase?" At this point, the protagonist responded to his father, "The inheritance of the conglomerate from my grandfather is not what I want. Should I just listen to people saying that I'm lucky to inherit just because I was born into a wealthy conglomerate?" Hearing this, the father asked again, "Do you intend to buy the best companies of Soonyen?" Do-jun calmly replied, "If it's certain that it's the best gift, it's just a dream." Upon hearing his son's words, the father gave a sly smile and then said, "In this case, I don't think I can help you. I have thought a lot about this." Do-jun expressed his surprise and wondered, "Why?" The father continued, "I have thought about how I can help you achieve your dream even once. If necessary, I will decide to use the legal rights of one of Chairman Do-jun's sons." Do-jun was confused by his father's words. What does he mean by the legal rights of a son? Suddenly, the father stood up, placed a hand on his son's shoulder, and said affectionately, "Anyway, thank you. Even if the family is fractured, I still have to compete with your brothers. Maybe I will negotiate with some subsidiaries or request cash or shares." The protagonist was bewildered. "Wait, this is a situation I never thought of." While he was still frozen, the father had already gone to the stairs and said, "I don't want to fight and compete because it's exhausting. It's late, I'm going to sleep. You should sleep too." At this moment, the protagonist suddenly called his father back. Dad, it's not like that. Wait a minute." Then Do-jun tried to be cute. "Please, Dad, talk a little more," but it was clear that the father wouldn't stay. The next day, at the parking lot of Chairman Do-jun's mansion, Do-jun wandered alone among the luxury cars and exclaimed, "There are so many people here." Then he slowly walked up the large, long staircase of the chairman's house. In the chairman's study, it was stated that foreign currency should not be brought into the conglomerate, not even a dollar, a yen, or a mark. "We need to rearrange the hot money that is due to be paid abroad soon. The banks have no intention of opening up dollars, they are clamping down on them." The chairman listened silently to the report. Due to the increase in exchange rates, the foreign exchange profits were good. However, the process of converting to military currency was still stagnant. The secretary, standing beside, also looked at the chairman thoughtfully. Then he asked, "Have you contacted the Deputy Prime Minister yet?" The chairman, visibly annoyed, replied, "Have you ever called him?" It was only then that the secretary said, he doesn't answer my calls. The chairman continued, he surely knows that your call is as good as mine. Say that he is planning to listen to calls from economists. The chairman, infuriated, asked, how much will we get if we liquidate all remaining funds within the conglomerate? The secretary reported, from now until the end of the year, if we make the payments, it will be over 400 billion won. Of course, due to the forex bottoming out, the conglomerate has lost a significant sum after acquiring Hanu. We still have to keep investing capital. The chairman, visibly angry while listening to the report, shouted, stop squandering money. We must immediately start collecting and convert all our holdings into dollars. The subordinates chimed in, though adjusting the price won't be effective. Everyone is lamenting the lack of dollars. The chairman, glaring at the person who dared to create chaos, was extremely furious, but a subordinate continued, there will surely be a special point, even if the exchange rate soars to 2,000 or even 3,000 won per dollar. Due to the dollar shortage, it's impossible to find any. The chairman remained silent, just listening. Then, the meeting room fell into silence. No one dared to move, while the subordinates busily searched for something to do, like wiping sweat. At that moment, the secretary called out, Chairman of the King Group? The chairman, upon hearing this, yelled, what? Did they accumulate some dollars in a secret basement? The secretary clarified that it wasn't that but rather about a sum of 1 to 2 trillion won left from the acquisition. The chairman then remembered and was startled. He joyfully said, exactly, that money from fantasy, right? They hold it in dollars. The secretary happily responded, yes, we'll receive dollars and repay with 1 to 2 trillion won. The remaining deficit can be borrowed from a bank. We're only short of dollars, not of funds. Moreover, we can issue Suyong bonds to acquire all the dollars that fantasy owns. If we pay a higher interest rate than fantasy's annual profit, it's entirely possible. A subordinate hurriedly asked Director Lai, they must also feel the crisis in their country. Just doubling the exchange rate can double their forex profit. Would they be satisfied with the bond interest rate? The secretary answered, we have to offer 1 to 2 trillion in military terms of the exchange rate. I'm referring to the bond interest rate in dollars. Despite hearing such calculated planning, the subordinates were secretly pleased. The chairman, too, was extremely satisfied with this outcome. He laughed loudly and said, we can solve this issue. The subordinates, clueless about what had happened, just silently watched the chairman laugh. The chairman continued, because I'm very close to the owner of fantasy. The secretary quickly interrupted, Sihun isn't easy to deal with. Han understands the value of the dollars his company holds better than anyone. At this point, the chairman calmly asked, Sihun is the owner? He continued, I've said before, I'm close to fantasy's chairman Sihun. He's just a representative. The subordinates were stunned by the shocking news, their eyes wide open in disbelief. The chairman inquired about those looks, don't misunderstand, it's not my money. How could I earn so many dollars? It's because you all don't work hard that my pockets are empty, understand? The secretary, hearing this, could only stand aside, lamenting his own laziness. Then, the chairman, infuriated, slammed his hand painfully on the table. He might be hesitant to speak, but expel everyone out. Don't miss any of this advice. At this time, the whole group of slaves hurriedly stood up, and were busy leaving. Only the secretary stayed, looking at the chairman with a doting look. Then, the secretary remained silent, bowed his head and did not say anything, then he politely turned around and went out. When he reached the door, he still held a grudge, because he could not say anything just now. Only the chairman was laughing happily, because he had calculated some wicked plan. In the heads of the subordinates, they also happily left, knowing that the matter had been resolved, and the chairman would not scold them anymore. Du-jun sat on the sofa, waiting, watching the subordinates smile brightly, looking at them as if they had just returned from singing karaoke. Du Jun drank banana milk while thinking. Thought that he had heard about a meeting due to a crisis. He expected everyone to have serious faces, but it turned out to be quite cheerful. Could it be because Sun Yan, being at the top of finance, has a strong capital base? At that moment, the chairman unexpectedly welcomed them in a strangely enthusiastic manner. "Oh, has the master arrived already?" Du Jun, just stepping in, suddenly felt that this man seemed a bit mad, which startled him. "The master? Could it be that he has appointed me as his successor in the urgent meeting? What happened earlier that made him act like this?" The chairman called out gently, "My grandson, you are not the master of fantasy." Hearing this, Du Jun realized that the chairman definitely had some ulterior motives. Chairman spoke, "Today, I am not meeting you as my grandson. Let's talk straightforwardly like two business owners." Du Jun quickly replied, "Why are you suddenly saying this, sir? It's quite frightening." The chairman laughed mockingly, "But you are already showing your true colors, and it's fascinating." Du Jun thought to himself, that's his expression, not mine. The fun belongs to those in a superior position, leaving no room for negotiation. Clearly, our ancestors were not in a superior position, but everyone had their secret cards. Mine were clear, but I still didn't know what his cards were. A foreign currency crisis was looming closer by the hour, by the minute. He seemed quite composed. At this moment, the chairman asked, "Have you prepared enough money to buy a train yet?" Du Jun feigned ignorance and answered, "What else needs to be prepared? Just transferring money from the foreign account to the domestic one should be enough." The chairman happily responded, "Of course, it has to be in dollars, right?" Then Du Jun realized that it was indeed about preparing dollars for the foreign exchange crisis. He replied, "Yes, the money is in a U.S. bank, so it has to be in dollars." The old man spoke, "Should I exchange it for 1.2 trillion won, right?" He pretended to continue, "The current exchange rate is about 1,200 won. Let's see, that's exactly $1 billion, right?" Du Jun also replied, "Yes, that's correct." The old man enticed him to talk about tomorrow as well. Hearing this from the old man, Du Jun smiled cunningly. He calmly leaned back and replied, "I don't like it." Chairman, who had been flattering him till now, became extremely angry when his beloved grandson said this. "What, Du Jun?" He continued, "It seems too complicated. Why not just give the money directly to the bank for the loan? Why go round and round like this?" Hearing this, the old man became even more infuriated and asked, "Could it be that you?" Du Jun laughed and said, "I also have my own sources of information. The dollar is constantly rising, isn't it? Anyway, the merger of Achinomoto and Suyangmoto must be completed before the lender signs the acquisition certificate. Then comes the payment step. From my standpoint, it's more beneficial to delay the payment." Chairman, sitting beside him, hearing his beloved grandson speak like this, wanted to throw him out. Then Du Jun thought, could it be that he thinks I'm too greedy? But the chairman was not only not angry but also laughed very happily. He said, "That's right, you must be like this to be my grandson." The chairman excitedly laughed. Now the story gets interesting. Du Jun looked at his old grandfather, feeling sorry for him as he seemed quite confused. Nonetheless, Du Jun still thought that he was a cunning man. The old man laughed to buy more time to think, then asked to adjust it to 1,500 won. "Grandpa, don't you think Du Jun should negotiate a bit more?" the chairman asked with a smile. This little thief managed to get 1,600 won, but Du Jun still isn't satisfied, he replied. "It's still not enough." At that moment, the old man asked the boy, "Isn't the amount of dollars you have a lot of money, considering the farm we bought for you? Have you forgotten?" But Du Jun answered, "That was a deal made when I was young. I studied hard, scored 100 in all subjects, and brought joy to you. You rewarded me with a farm, right? I know you spent 10 million won to buy back the farm, but I think using that 10 million won to bring joy to you is also a fair deal. To you, those 10 million won are like 10,000 won to ordinary people, the old man said, scratching his head. Cunning boy, you remember everything, don't you? Dujun smiled and replied, weren't you the one who brought up the story from 15 years ago? But the old man still smiled as if he had fallen into a trap. He decided to be straightforward. How much do you want? Let me hear it, Dujun said. He sat up straight, pulled his chair closer to his grandfather, and affectionately called, Grandpa, if you want to use soon-to-be worthless money to buy dollars, which are more precious than gold, of course the scale will be unbalanced. Add something else to the scale. The chairman was alarmed. What do you mean worthless? Grandpa, how much do you think the exchange rate will rise to call it worthless? The chairman asked. Dujun replied, if you can't find dollars due to scarcity, and you can't buy anything with money, isn't it just paper? If currency can't fulfill its role, isn't it just paper? Hearing his grandson's analysis, the old man's eyes widened in alarm. He placed his hand on his expensive wooden desk and tapped it cunningly. Seeing him silent, the protagonist also felt a bit nervous. He thought, did I attack too strongly? Seeing him deep in thought, he must have softened. Maybe I should support him with a reasonable amount of dollars. At that moment, Dujun suddenly felt extremely happy, even though he was in a dominant position. He reminded himself not to lose this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for sentimentality. Meanwhile, the old man was still thinking and had been silent for a while. He placed his hand on his expensive wooden desk and was calculating something. Then he asked, how did you know our country is running out of dollars? Honestly, I learned it from the media, Dujun replied. The chairman was startled. What do you mean, media? Dujun answered, yes, the media is raising all the alarm signals. The story writers are trying to find solutions, but they also understand it's too late. The old man said, the media, of course, likes sensational news. They are exaggerating. Hearing this, Dujun realized that the old man was sensing the danger but still said that, which meant he wanted to know what Dujun was thinking. So he said, Grandpa, the truth is like a poetry collection. The chairman didn't understand the boy's metaphor. What do you mean by a poetry collection? Dujun continued politely, well, most people don't read poetry, but new collections are always being published. Yet, there are poets who receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. The chairman praised his grandson, you're right. The truth has great power, but almost everyone doesn't read it or just ignores it. At this moment, he asked seriously, so what should I put on the scale to balance it? Dujun looked at him and thought, I won't make the foolish mistake of answering first. After all, Suyang is the one falling into the water, and I'm holding the lifebuoy, waiting for the moment when the water rises above our noses. When Sun Yan truly feels the pain, when Sun Yan starts throwing gold bars from his bag, that's when I'll throw the lifebuoy. While thinking and imagining this scene, he felt secretly elated. The chairman couldn't wait any longer and urged, come on, speak up, let's hear it. Dujun straightforwardly said, you should place the negotiation terms of the merger ratio on the scale, Mr. Chairman. Hearing his nephew's words, which seemed confusing, he asked again, merger ratio? At this point, Dujun smiled as if he had won a prize, while the old man, being at his nephew's doorstep, didn't dare to say anything. He pointed at Dujun and said, look at him, it turns out he has a dark heart. Dujun chuckled inwardly, thinking, he really has intentions when merging. The shares of Sun Yan Group have to flow into Sun Yan Motor, making the merger favorable for me. That's the condition. Dujun replied, I don't think it's dark-hearted. It's just a reasonable request to bring to the negotiation table. The chairman scolded the kid, you're like oil, indeed ambitious. Dujun answered, in this world, who isn't ambitious? Isn't business about reducing others' ambitions and fulfilling one's own? The chairman just sat there, silently listening to his nephew's sermon. Du Jun continued, ambitions will always be criticized. If I'm going to be criticized anyway, I might as well have big ambitions. The chairman still didn't say anything but just sat quietly, observing his beloved nephew. Du Jun also looked resolute, staring straight into his eyes without flinching. Suddenly, the old man smiled contentedly and praised his nephew, truly a filial descendant, or rather, a grand filial descendant. He corrected himself. Du Jun quickly pretended to be naive and said, "Of course. Haven't I always made you happy? From childhood, I studied hard to make you happy. As an adult, I've prepared all the money you need. It's hard to find another nephew like me." The old man replied, "That's true, but you've given me something bigger." Du Jun was surprised, wondering what the old man was suddenly talking about. The chairman continued, "When I built Sun Yan from a subsidiary into a group that no one dared to confront, everyone just bowed their heads and tried to take my things. After preparing meticulously and clenching my fists, I waited, but saw no one daring to steal my things." Du Jun looked at the old man, confused. What's this? Does he want to ignite a fire at 70 and see his grandson as a rival? The old man joyfully said to Du Jun, "Even if I share with everyone, I won't let anyone steal my things." Du Jun, feeling a bit scared, said, "Sir, the bigger thing isn't that, right?" At this moment, the old man's face broke into a sly and utterly incomprehensible smile. He fanned the flames like Sangoku and said, "Exactly. Let's ignite the fire and see who wins." Du Jun suddenly panicked, "Grandpa, am I really your grandson?" The old man, full of energy, said, "That's what makes it interesting, a battle between grandfather and grandson." At this point, Du Jun began to feel hesitant and worried. Du Jun sat anxiously, waiting to see, "What is his proposal, Chairman?" He replied, "I will decide the merger ratio into the shares of Sun Yan Motors. You just need to accept. I might show you more than what you have to fight for. I am your grandfather." What kind of grandfather would be heartless to his grandson? What do you think? Du Jun answered as he had been told, "I am dutiful, which means I am filial, everyone." The chairman joyfully asked, "Does that mean you agree to my proposal?" Hearing him ask that, Du Jun smirked arrogantly, "Are you saying this dutiful grandson made all your joys disappear?" The old grandfather, taken aback by his grandson's sudden cruelty, was confused. But being more wicked himself, he laughed and replied, "Indeed." He said that without fighting back, one is not a real man. "Of course, I will refuse your first offer." Du Jun then asked, "What is the second offer?" The chairman said, "It's not exactly an offer, it's more like a threat. If you are threatened, you will regret not accepting the first offer." Hearing this, Du Jun felt slightly uneasy. What exactly is he planning to threaten with such a warning? There hasn't been anything worth threatening yet. The old man said, "You refused my offer, so Sun Yan Motors and Achimoto will not merge." Hearing this, Du Jun was shocked. The old man said, "Tomorrow, Director Cheho will have a press conference because the acquirer of Akin Group, Fantasy, has many unreasonable demands, so the merger failed. I am sorry for causing public concern." The old man ended his hypothetical speech, terrifying Du Jun. The old man grinned, pleased to have threatened his beloved grandson. Du Jun obediently called out, "Grandpa." The chairman gently replied, "Yes, speak." Du Jun narrowed his eyes and spoke in a deep, hellish tone, "It seems your agreement is quite weak." Hearing this, the chairman was at a loss on how to react. Then, the two of them looked at each other with deep, loving eyes. Du Jun looked at the old man with his innocent and handsome face. Perhaps due to old age and weakness, the old man still didn't understand. "Weak means what?" he shouted. "Are you implying that even if acquiring Akin goes beyond limits, it's not a problem? Are you underestimating the acquisition of Akin?" He angrily looked at his grandson and asked, "Do you want to stop because things are not going smoothly?" Du Jun calmly replied, "There's no such thing. Have you ever thought that if the merger fails, I still couldn't acquire a kin? The chairman said rightly, merger is the first condition in this matter, but Du Jun is still calm. The situation has changed, sir. He looked at the old man and said, now it's an emergency situation. The old man did not expect the boy to be so wise. Afterward, the two of them sat looking at each other deeply without speaking. About half an hour later, the old man finally said, there is one thing that doesn't change. Du Jun wondered what that could be. The chairman, now brimming with energy and joy, confidently said, it's my influence. If I cancel the merger and inform the Green National Bank Loan Party, the acquisition will fall apart. I bet others will withdraw their bids, he said maliciously, then Chairman Chu of Dihin will call me for a drink. Du Jun was still silently absorbing everything the old man said. The chairman maliciously asked again, what do you think? Do you still believe you can acquire a kin without a merger? Du Jun remembered his past life and guessed that in a few days the government would announce, the Deputy Prime Minister has applied to the IMS for a bailout fund. Clearly, it's the end of November. Du Jun softly called out, Grandpa. The chairman, delighted, replied, what, are you scared now? Du Jun said, the government has poured $11 billion into the foreign exchange market, but the exchange rate is still soaring. You've also read the Bloomberg article, right? Our country's available foreign exchange reserves are only $2 billion. Deputy Prime Minister Kang even appeared on TV, expressing hope for loans from allied countries. The chairman, surprised, asked, Du Jun, are you implying that our strength has diminished due to the foreign exchange crisis? Du Jun replied, no, it hasn't diminished, old man, with a smug, cunning smile. However, Du Jun added, it's not just diminishing, it's disappearing. I'm talking about your influence, sir. It's like you've been slapped right after getting married. The chairman, annoyed, asked, what? Du Jun replied, I might face difficulties surviving, but is your phone call still effective? The chairman couldn't believe how cunning this young man was. Du Jun respectfully advised his grandfather, you should consider the current situation more carefully. Even if your influence diminishes and there's a reauction, it's okay. In fact, I'd be grateful. At that time, I won't have any competition and it will become Fantasy's exclusive auction. Just think, in this situation, the buyback amount won't be 120 million won like before. Even if I spend all 800 billion won, the lenders will still kneel before me, right? The chairman sat silently, waiting to give a lengthy speech. Innocently, Du Jun said, Chairman Chu of Daehyun must be relieved now. If he had spent 1 or 2 trillion won to buy a kin, he would be panicking due to lack of cash. At this point, the chairman understood everything. He called out to Du Jun, but Du Jun raised his hand, please let me say one last thing. The old man's silence meant he agreed to listen. Du Jun clearly said, part of you hopes the current critical situation will improve, or maybe that's your wish. But using a voice from hell, I say that won't happen. The old man didn't know how to react to his increasingly cruel words. Du Jun continued, keep talking. Just look at the truth and you'll know our country can't avoid this crisis. Du Jun thought to himself, feeling uneasy that something that should collapse hasn't yet. Not just him, but everyone thinks the same, yet they still believe that a large economy like South Korea won't easily collapse. Du Jun knew that belief was just seeking out one's own insecurity. The old man asked, are you sure about that, Du Jun? Du Jun replied, yes, a big event will happen in just a few days. The old man continued, keep going. You are Sun Yen Group. There must be $1 billion you're holding, right? Du Jun confidently said. Our country's foreign exchange reserves are just around $2 billion, and I'm holding half of that. When the dollar fever spreads to South Korea, all businesses and banks will rush to Fantasy's office, the old man said sarcastically. Then, if I want to see you, I'll probably need to take a number. Jun respectfully answered, "Of course not, it's number 0. Right now, you're talking to me, aren't you?" After saying this, the two continued to calculate how to confront each other. The old man was both happy and sad. He didn't know whether he was happy or sad. Then he decided to act quickly and laughed. He began, "I have to call Lee Hatcher and scold him. I need to talk to my grandson." Jun was surprised and didn't know why the old man would call him. He thought, could the old man be taking a step back? It was the first time he had done so. Was the chairman of the conglomerate listening to this grandson? Despite feeling great, he didn't understand why this time, the devilish boy didn't laugh. Suddenly, Jun exclaimed, "Grandpa, I don't feel happy anymore." The chairman scolded, "What, you brat, are you messing with me because you have some dollars?" Jun replied, "I'm serious. I need to quickly complete the acquisition of a kin, there's still so much to do." The chairman, perplexed, asked, "So many tasks to handle? Is there something more important than this matter?" Jun replied, "Yes, I have to walk around with dollars in hand and put them into the basket of another business. I also have to negotiate prices." For the first time in his life, the chairman felt astonished by his grandson's boasting about money. Then, he opened his eyes wide as if he had discovered some secret. This was the second time Jun had seen him so surprised. In front of him, Chairman Xinyang, the founder of the Sunyan conglomerate, was an astonishing legend to him. In a moment, he had won over the chairman. At that point, the chairman looked at his grandson and yelled, "How many dollars do you actually have?" Boasting, Jun said, "I can't open my wallet for you to see, but I probably have enough to buy back Qiyu Osung motor." The old man, astounded, asked, "You have enough dollars to buy back Qiyu Osung?" Jun, very calmly, replied, "Yes, I plan to acquire 2 car companies, Achimoto and Qiyu Osung. If I include Sunyan Motor, I should be on par with Dihin Motor." Slamming the table, Jun said, "I will take them over and hang the Sunyan sign for you, old man." Surprisingly, he saw that his grandson was incredibly filial. Jun continued, "This is another gift for you, as a filial grandson. I'll wait for your second proposal. Everyone should meet and find out how much time is left. I hope you and everyone else will make a decision soon before the number of people waiting increases. This grandson dares to stand up and talk to me, which is quite annoying. You seem to agree that my fate is weak, but everything is not over yet. Until it truly ends, this is what the descendant once said, right?" Now I realize that those words were not nonsense. Jun still smiled, seeing that the old man was starting to talk a bit much. He responded, "There's also the saying about knowing when to retreat." This was something the old man had directly said to him. Hearing the grandson repeat, "Exactly what I said," the old man burst into laughter, saying, "Hearing that again sounds so absurd." As the old man laughed, Jun found it funny too. So the two of them laughed together. Then the two, one standing and one sitting, continued as if they had won the lottery. After those joyful moments outside, everyone knows that those who laugh often have many worries. The lonely chairman sat alone in the large conference room, tapping on the expensive table. He thought to himself, "I can clearly sense the danger, but its magnitude and depth differ. Temporary difficulties are not foreign exchange issues or anything special. At times like these, the government will solve it by exchanging money or borrowing dollars from the Americas and Japan." Then he tapped the table again, pondering the situation, but the more he thought about it, the angrier he became.